we hear BBC, we hear, CNN, Voice of America, etc. Occasionally you get snippets of the truth. But the propaganda that is going on, quite frankly, is not giving us both sides of the thing. However, it comes as no surprise to me.
The African debt is in U.S. dollars. Africa has to earn the U.S. dollars, and the only way it can earn the U.S. dollars is not to be assassinated for growing its own food and becoming independent and doing something that the United States does not like. The principle underlying the foundation of the World Bank, the International Bank for IBRD, research, the World Bank, is that no country should grow its own food. Africa and the third world should only grow export crops. To export, in order to have an oversupply of cocoa and other tropical raw materials, to keep down the price, they must buy their grain from the United States or Europe, so that if they do something that we don't like, we can do what America tried to do to China in the 60s. We can sanction them. We can say, we're going to starve you. We're going to not export any grain to you. So owing their foreign debt in dollars means that they have to somehow sell something that the United States wants, not what they want. I think the most evil organizations in the world today are the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
They told us Africa was independent, that colonization was over. But what if I told you? The chains never left. They just became invisible. In this video, we'll expose the 5 invisible chains the West still uses to control Africa, from economic slavery to military dominance to media manipulation. And if you think colonization ended in the 60s, what you're about to see will shake you to the core. They call it aid, but it's really a weapon. Africa receives billions in loans from the IMF and World Bank, but those loans come with strings, conditions that force governments to privatize, cut social programs, and sell natural resources for cheap. Ghana, Kenya, Zambia, all drowning in debt, not because they mismanaged, but because the system was built to keep them paying forever. For every $1 Africa receives in aid, over $3 leaves in debt repayment, profit extraction, or resource theft.
I have a question. What's the difference between the U.S. debt and the debt that African nations own? Because the U.S. debt doesn't keep the U.S. from being one of the leading powers of the world, but then African nations can't make it because of that debt that is strangling them.
Shall I talk? Okay. The first question is a very important question. What makes African and third world debt different from the American debt? Number one, America is never going to pay its debts. It doesn't have to. Its debts are in its own currency. We can simply print it. The African debt is not in its currency. The African debt is in U.S. dollars. Africa has to earn the U.S. dollars, and the only way it can earn the U.S. dollars is not to be assassinated for growing its own food and becoming independent and doing something that the United States does not like. The principle underlying the foundation of the World Bank, the International Bank for IBRD, research, the World Bank, is that no country should grow its own food. Africa and the third world should only grow export crops. To export, in order to have an oversupply of cocoa and other tropical raw materials, to keep down the price, they must buy their grain from the United States or Europe, so that if they do something that we don't like, we can do what America tried to do to China in the 60s. We can sanction them. We can say, we're going to starve you. We're going to not export any grain to you. So owing their foreign debt in dollars means that they have to somehow sell something that the United States wants, not what they want. I think the most evil organizations in the world today are the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And my book, Super Imperialism, that I wrote in 1972, is all about that. The largest purchasers of the book were the Defense Department and the CIA. I was immediately, the organization I worked for was given a $75,000, $85,000 Defense Department contract for me to come to explain to them how American imperialism worked, and they used it as a how to do it book. They thought it was just spontaneous. And I had written the book thinking that socialists in third world countries would do something about it, and indeed it was translated into Spanish and other languages. But it was really the Defense Department that applied most of this, and I was amazed when I was invited to the White House to explain how imperialism worked. And my boss said, "We've run rings around the British imperialists. This is how to do it. You make them owe the debts in your currency, not their own. You control their central bank and make them financially dependent on you, and then you've got a stranglehold for them." So certainly the third world countries should cancel the debts under the odious debt principle. I haven't been able to convince any of them to do it because they said if we do that, the CIA will kill us. So how do you break that cycle? That's a problem I've not been able to solve.
Why does France still have military bases in West Africa? Why does the US have 29 known bases across the continent? The lie is security. The truth? Strategic domination, control of uranium, gold, trade routes, and political puppets. This reminds me of Ibrahim Traoré's words, and I quote, "How can you claim sovereignty when foreign soldiers are the ones guarding your land?" 14 African countries still use the Franc CFA, a colonial currency controlled by France. Here's the insane part. 50% of reserves are held in France's central bank. France can veto monetary policies. African countries are literally paying to be colonized. Imagine working for 60 years and still letting your former boss hold your salary. This is the reality of these African nations.
Si chiama Franc CFA. È la moneta coloniale che la Francia stampa per 14 nazioni africane, alle quali applica il signoraggio e in forza delle quali sfrutta le risorse di questa nazione. Questo è un bambino che lavora in una miniera d'oro in Burkina Faso. Il Burkina Faso è una delle nazioni più povere del mondo. Per il Burkina Faso, che ha l'oro, la Francia stampa moneta coloniale. In cambio pretende che finiscano nelle casse del tesoro francese il 50% di tutto quello che il Burkina Faso esporta. L'oro che questo bambino si infila in un cunicolo per tirare fuori finisce per lo più nelle casse dello Stato francese. Allora la soluzione non è prendere gli africani e spostarli in Europa, la soluzione è liberare l'Africa da certi europei che la sfruttano e consentire a queste persone di vivere di quello che hanno.
They don't just control our money, they control how the world sees us. CNN, BBC, France 24, always showing Africa as poor, violent, unstable. But who's behind those stories? Who benefits when the world thinks Africa can't govern itself? When Ibrahim Traore speaks truth, they call him a threat. When Africa rises, they call it instability. The West doesn't fear African chaos. It fears African independence.
We hear BBC. We hear, CNN, Voice of America, etc. Occasionally you get snippets of the truth. But the propaganda that is going on, quite frankly, is not giving us both sides of the thing. However, it comes as no surprise to me, because the media war is another form of war. I mean, there's the war of the bullet, and there is the war of the words, disinformation and misinformation. It's probably more effective than whatever it is. Yes. And let me say something to you in Europe and America. If you could speak the language of my people who have not even been to school, and try to listen to their wisdom, you'll be impressed. But you see, you've got to understand the complication, the extent to which the English colonial language has been used to intimidate our people, so that their native wisdom through their own language, the best of them cannot come out. Because the English language is the language by which you're used to judge whether you're intelligent or not. If the media, especially in America, for instance, could give you both sides of the story as pertains to foreign policies and foreign actions, you will bring so much pressure to bear, because you still live in a world with the capacity and the ability to be able to influence your presidents. You can impeach your presidents like in America. So you as a people still have power, unlike us. In Africa, they disempower. That was the difference between me and some of the others in my country. I believe in empowering people. And when you empower people, it is their will that prevails, okay? You just provide the leadership. However, the point I want to make is that in a situation where people are disempowered, like in some parts of my continent, what happens is that I'm the little tin god. I call the shots. But you people are empowered enough, not only that, but if you're informed enough, you can make the decisions. You can tell your president. You can stand up to your president. Provided you are getting the correct information, both sides of it. So in effect, what I'm trying to say is that the media, I think, must wake up to its responsibilities, and do what is just. Let me just say something.
Oil, gold, diamonds, cobalt, cocoa. Africa is rich, but the people still poor. Foreign companies take the resources, then sell them back as finished products at 10x the price. Over 70% of Congo's cobalt is mined under brutal conditions, then shipped to Western tech companies to make your phone. This is not trade. This is economic slavery wearing a suit. For the first time in decades, African leaders are standing up. Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta in Mali, Bassirou Faye in Senegal. They're kicking out colonial powers, rejecting debt deals, defending African dignity. And I love what Ibrahim Traore said, and I quote, "We'd rather be free and hungry than fed and enslaved." So now I ask you, has Ibrahim Traore hit the nail right on the head? Is this the dawn of a new African revolution? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you believe Africa deserves real freedom. Share it so more people can hear the truth they were never taught. Subscribe, because we've got a lot of interesting videos coming up and wouldn't like to miss them.